Welcome! This instructional video provides a virtual tour of a produce farm with a focus on conducting regulatory produce inspections. Throughout this video, you'll hear from Kevin Gerrity, an FDA National Food Expert.
Hi, my name is Kevin Gerrity. I'm a national expert with the FDA Office of Food and Feed Operations. I've been with the agency about 25 years. I was hired as a chemist originally, but I've always worked with foods, always been with the Office of Regulatory Affairs, which we call ORA. I'm here today to talk to you about farm inspections under the new produce rule and the priorities of farm inspections and how they operate. There's going to be differences between farms. We have one regulation, but we have different ways of operating farms by region, by commodity. Everything's different. You've seen one farm, you've seen one farm. You cannot assume that farm is going to be the same every time you go out. And so we have to recognize that and leave that flexibility even though we have a single regulation.
You'll also hear from Armando Figueroa, the Food Safety Regulatory Compliance Manager for Braga Fresh Family Farms, a large farm operation in California, and Mike Villaneva, the Technical Director for the California Leafy Green Marketing Agreement.
Good morning, I'm Mike Villaneva. I'm the Technical Director for the California Leafy Green Marketing Agreement. And with me here is Armando Figueroa. He's the Food Safety Manager for Braga Farms. Armando, tell me a little bit about what you do as a Food Safety Manager.
Oh, okay. Well, I oversee and manage the whole food safety program for the farm and also the harvesting for the company. So I do a lot of interactions with the employees from the farming, also from the harvesting, training, conducting trainings, and just monitoring and doing visual inspections.
In this video, you'll see a suggested approach to assessing a farm's compliance with the FDA Produce Safety Rule, providing regulations for the growing, harvesting, packing, and holding of produce for human consumption. The initial interview marks the official start to the inspection. If you make a pre-inspection call with the farm, you will have determined a time and place to meet with someone from the farm to conduct the initial interview. The initial interview may take place on the farm or nearby at an easy-to-reach location, such as a coffee shop, due to the fact that not all farms have straightforward addresses, and you may have to be led or driven to the farm to start your inspection.
Produce safety inspections will be different from routine food inspections that the FDA performs. We can't assume that we're going to arrive to a certain location and that's going to be an active farm every year. The fields change from year to year. And we're also going to work with the farmers to help work around their schedules, to help build those professional relationships we need to build because we haven't had that interaction with the farmers in the past.
To begin the initial interview, present your credentials or identification and issue the Notice of Inspection or agency equivalent. Then, you'll discuss with the farm representative what you want to inspect and how you want to inspect it.
We'll talk a little bit about the structure of these farm inspections. The inspections are going to be based upon the produce rule, and so we're going to structure the inspections around the rule. We're going to look to see that the farmers are complying with the requirements of the rule in terms of employee training, monitoring their water quality to ensure that it meets the requirements for their farm. If they're using biological soil amendments, ensure that they're using those properly so that it does not contaminate the produce, and what they're doing to ensure that food contact surfaces are maintained in a clean and sanitary manner.
You'll also want to ask the farm representative about their visitor policy. If they have a policy in writing, ask to see a copy.
Whenever we have, say, a visitor over, they have to first check into the office. Once they check into the office, they're told the rules that they have to follow, and the rules that they have to follow are very identical to if they were even an employee, say they're harvesting product for us. They have to obviously not wear any jewelry, they have to wear a hairnet. Before entering a field, they have to wash their hands with soap and water, and then if they want to touch product, obviously wear gloves. They're not allowed to wear any type of anything that could put the crop in jeopardy. Obviously, they get inspected before they get in. The same thing, they're not allowed to take any product home. So those are the rules we implement.
Throughout your inspection, evaluate the farm's implementation of the visitor policy to determine if the farm is enforcing food safety procedures and practices. If the farm does not have a formalized visitor policy, observe how they interact with other visitors to the farm. In addition to discussing the structure of the inspection and the visitor policy, you'll also discuss any follow-ups from previous inspections. If there were areas for improvement, ask what the farm did to correct the conditions and plan for them to show you their corrections during the inspection. At this time, you can also let the farm know of any records you wish to review later, so they have time to compile them while you're out walking the farm. If the farm has a map of its property, you may want to ask for a copy to include in your inspection report. If the farm is not able to provide a map, sketch the layout as you inspect the farm and record the GPS coordinates of fields, structures, and features so you can create a diagram later. The diagram should include the fields, water distribution system, sanitary facilities, storage buildings, and any other structures or features on the farm. Your evaluation of the farm environment begins even before you start the inspection, as you take note of the area surrounding the farm and how the adjacent land is used. Once you start the inspection, you'll want to walk or drive the farm's perimeter, looking for any possible sources and routes of contamination of the produce. If the farm is located near a hill or body of water, look for possible runoff routes that may lead to the farm. If the farm is located near any established structures, walk the areas of the farm near the structures to determine their usage and determine if there is any potential for contamination. These areas may harbor pests that can easily make their way onto the farm. Also look for any drainage with access to the farm. If the farm is adjacent to a smaller structure, such as a barn, ask questions about how the structure is used. Is it storing something? And if so, what? If it's empty, is it secured? Is it harboring any wildlife? Walk the perimeter looking for any areas of concern. If there is private property, such as a house, located on or near the farm, ask questions to determine possible routes of contamination. What type of sewage system is the house using? Are there children or pets living in the house? Do they have access to the fields? Ask permission to do a tour around the property, but be mindful of the owner's privacy.
When we're on farms, some of the things that are going to be different from a routine food inspection will be what we run into in the farm, the use of adjacent land, or even land upon that farm. We may find private residences on the farm, and how we have to be very careful how we approach those. We have to recognize this is a person's home. You don't want to enter a person's private home unless you absolutely need to. The types of reasons we may need to talk to these people, for instance, if we need to know about their septic system, do they have a leach system or a septic tank? Where is that? How is it maintained? If that may have an effect on the safety of our farm. Those are the types of things we may need to know, and that's why we may need to contact these people on the farm.
Farms that are situated near residential developments are especially susceptible to contamination, whether from sewage, garbage, or illegal dumping. Inspect the area to look for any signs of possible contamination, and talk to the farm representative about the security measures in place.
On a ranch, you'll sometimes get people fascinated with what's growing. So that's another thing our employers are aware of. If there's anybody that doesn't look to be, hey, who is this person? Who are they? What are they doing? They can put the crop in jeopardy. So we don't know where they've been. We don't want them to handle a crop that we're growing for the public that's gonna put the crop in danger. So if we see something abnormal, we'll go out and tell that person or that individual, just hey, you don't belong here, I'm sorry, but you gotta be escorted out.
Effective employee training is a key part of developing a good food safety culture. Farm workers who handle produce or food contact surfaces are required to complete training on both their assigned responsibilities and the importance of health and hygiene on the farm. Effective training covers all applicable requirements and is presented in a manner that workers are going to understand.
Training, that's very critical and very important here in this company, and also just in the industry as a whole. We see training as vital and crucial. That is one of the number one vehicles of a potential cross-contamination if things are not handled right. So all of our employees are trained before they even start the season as an employee. So they go to numerous, about 4 hours of training that they have to conduct. And during that training, there's a lot of different illustrations and visual and, talked about the rules and policies, but also just coaching them on what to do in the event that something happens, kind of giving illustrations on different scenarios that could happen and what to do. The more important thing is just the communication part. That's very critical, because there are our eyes and ears out there in the field. You know, I'm not everywhere at once, so having them also understanding what the importance of food safety is very crucial.
During your inspection, review the training program and look at the training records. If observed employee practices indicate deficiencies that should be addressed in an effective training program, review the materials to ensure that the regulations are covered and that language and literacy considerations are in place. Remember that there is also specific required harvester training. If you determine that the training isn't being presented in a manner that is appropriate for the workforce, discuss the inadequacies with the training supervisor. You may also cite training deficiencies on your inspectional observation form, especially if you observe inappropriate employee practices that are a result of employees receiving inadequate training. Effective employee training leads to proper employee practices. Throughout your inspection, observe employees during covered activities, looking for any practices that could introduce contamination to the produce and/or food surface areas. Pay special attention to employee practices when entering and exiting the farm areas, handling produce and/or food contact surfaces, using toilet and hand washing facilities. Employees must also adhere to hygienic practices and maintain general personal cleanliness. Clothing, footwear, personal protective equipment, or PPE, for example, aprons or gloves, or any other garments worn while handling produce or performing covered activities should remain in good repair. During the inspection, ask the farm about practices to prevent employees from bringing contamination onto the farm and moving contamination from one area to another. Employees who handle produce or food contact surfaces with their hands must wash hands thoroughly to prevent them from becoming a source of contamination. Employees must not eat or use chewing gum or tobacco products. Does the farm have a policy for ill workers? Determine how the farm handles employees that report an illness. Employees must be instructed to report symptoms of illness to a supervisor. Proper availability, design, and usage of toilet and hand washing facilities is essential to keeping foodborne illnesses at bay. In the U.S., accessibility of toilets must follow OSHA requirements. Farm workers must have easy access to sanitary facilities.
The produce regulation requires that growers provide their employees with restrooms while they're working on the farm. And when you would provide employees with restrooms is when you're planting, when you're weeding, when you're harvesting, whenever you have field workers out in the field, you provide those toilets to those field workers. And we'll inspect those toilets to make sure they're in sanitary condition. In terms of how many toilets you have to provide per how many employees you have, how far away they have to be, those specific rules are actually under OSHA regulations, but we just take a generalized approach where the toilets need to be accessible by your employees. No more than a 5-minute walk, say a half a mile or less. So they have to be able to get to those toilets.
When inspecting sanitary facilities, you should assess if the toilet is designed, located, and maintained to prevent contamination. The first thing you want to look for is proper design. Determine if toilets are maintained in good repair or show evidence of disrepair, like a leak. Design elements, such as self-closing doors, may help to keep toilet facility waste contained. If the farm uses portable toilets that are moved as the crew moves through the field, check to see that there is no leakage from the unit when it is moved. The next thing you want to inspect is proper maintenance of the entire unit. This includes a clean, sanitary condition, available toilet paper, and regular waste removal. Check the internal service sticker dates, if available, to ensure that the units are being serviced regularly. Every toilet must be accompanied by a hand washing station in close proximity. During your inspection, confirm that hand washing stations are available, that they're sourced with clean water, and that soap and hand towels are stocked. Also confirm that the used water is captured as opposed to falling to the ground. A waste bin must be provided to collect used towels. Preferably, waste bins should have a lid or be otherwise designed to prevent used towels from blowing into the fields. Most importantly, confirm that employees are washing their hands with soap and water after using the toilets. Hand sanitizers are not a substitute for washing with soap and water. While there is no requirement to do so, many farms will create a buffer zone around toilets and hand washing stations to protect against potential contamination to the crops.
When we have porta potties on a farm, as farmers are required to provide restrooms to their employees, it creates a potential contamination source on that farm. So we're going to look at those porta potties. We're going to look at design standards to make sure that they're designed properly, that they're not going to leak. Another thing we're going to look for in terms of the porta potties is a lot of farms will actually move the porta potties off-site to pump them out rather than have the sewage truck come on-site. Either way, we're going to look to see how they maintain those toilets. If the sewage truck is coming on site, we're going to look to make sure that they have practices that will prevent the contamination of the crop with feces. If they're pulling those porta potties off-site to pump them out, we're going to look to make sure that those porta potties aren't going to splash and leak on the farm as they're being driven off to that off-site location. So just having the porta potties on the farm, while that is a food safety improvement, also creates another food safety issue that you have to deal with.
If the farm has not provided adequate toilets for their employees, search the perimeter of the farm for private areas that employees may be using as a bathroom, such as bushes or ditches. If you find such areas being used as bathrooms, point it out to the farm representative and educate them on the food safety hazard created by not providing adequate restrooms for their employees. Prior to the establishment of industry food safety standards, farmlands were typically accessible to the public. People could often be seen riding horses or walking dogs along the fields. Today, farms must safeguard against animal intrusion to ensure that their fields are not being contaminated, while being sensitive to environmental and species concerns. This applies to wild animals and animals that are on the farm, both working and livestock.
Understanding your environment and your surroundings is very crucial. One of the things we do is, think about, okay, what kind of mitigations can we implement? One being fencing, one being buffers, ditches, those are the type of barriers that we always kind of, the norms that we implement. Signs as well, written signs to tell people that they're not allowed is very crucial. Like the animal intrusion part, going back to training, we could implement fencing all over the ranch, but it doesn't keep all animals away. The more importantly is going back into training the people. There are eyes and ears. If they see anything, down fencing or animals coming in from a section, they report it, to, for example, myself, and we, take action on the situation.
When you're inspecting the farm grounds, look for any signs of possible intrusion. For instance, while there is no regulation stating that farms must have fencing, a broken or incomplete fence may be a sign of animal intrusion. The presence of animal tracks, feces, or damaged crops are also signs of intrusion. While animals are a natural part of the farm environment, it is important that farms monitor animal intrusion and take appropriate steps to prevent the harvest of contaminated produce. Fences are often used to prevent larger animals from accessing the farm, while netting buried underground and PVC traps are options for stopping rodents. Physical barriers are not required. Birds on the farm are another possible source of animal intrusion and can carry pathogens, but they're not as easily deterred. Some common deterrents are noisemakers, mylar strips, and scarecrows. Prior to every harvest, farms are required to perform an assessment to determine if there are any areas that may have become contaminated by wild or domestic animals. Farms typically will monitor continually for intrusion throughout the growing and harvesting season. The presence of animals does not automatically mean that crops have been contaminated. However, if contamination is apparent, farms should implement corrective actions in the affected area, such as identifying and removing the contaminant. The farm may also choose to set up buffer zones to indicate areas where produce should not be harvested.
Before you get into a field, there's got to be some issues and concerns that are part of your food safety program. Can you elaborate a little bit about what happens in those circumstances?
Yeah, so some of the mitigations we have before we enter a field every day is our foremans, they're they inspect the ranch on a daily basis before they even enter and harvest for the day. What they do is they inspect the perimeters, making sure there's no abnormal issues that would put the crop in danger.
During the inspection, walk around the farm to see if there is evidence of animal intrusion. Farms located near bodies of water or wooded areas where animals are likely to be found may be especially susceptible. Ask the farm representative about the steps the farm is taking to identify animal intrusion and how the farm responds when evidence of animal intrusion is found, including how the farm addresses produce that may be contaminated. Agricultural water means water used in covered activities on covered produce where water is intended to, or is likely to, contact covered produce or food contact surfaces. This includes water used for irrigation, water used for preparing crop sprays, water used for washing or cooling harvested produce, and water used for preventing dehydration of covered produce. Water touches nearly every part of the farm, from irrigating fields to cooling harvested crops to hand-washing stations. If the water touches covered crops and/or food contact surfaces, care must be taken to prevent the water from becoming a food safety concern. Confirming proper use of water on the farm will make up a large part of your inspection. Water distribution systems use 3 types of water: groundwater, such as water from a well, surface water, and municipal water. When inspecting groundwater, start by inspecting the wells. The first thing you want to look at is the general condition of the well. Is the well in good shape? Is the pad cracked? Are the seals complete? Is water gathering near the opening of the well? Next, you want to check that there are backflow prevention devices in place.
We'll talk a little bit about agricultural water and specifically about well water. When we look at well water, we want to protect those wells from contamination. And the types of things we're going to look for is that the well is properly sealed and grouted, and also that you don't have any potential cross connections to that well. The most common cross connection we find on water systems, including wells, is going to be the common hose. A hose connected to your well can actually connect your well to soiled water. If you have puddled water, that water is contaminated, and if you had a backflow event from that well, water dropped back down, it could suck that water through that hose into your well and contaminate your well. So if you do have connections to your well, such as hoses, we're going to look for backflow prevention devices or backflow prevention techniques, such as keeping those hoses up off the ground and that type of control.
If the well is in good condition and no issues are observed, your inspection of the well should only take a few minutes. The second type of water, surface water, has different food safety concerns than groundwater. If groundwater is transferred to a container exposed to the environment, such as holding ponds, open tanks, and reservoirs, it becomes surface water. Surface water containers may be raised above ground level to eliminate the chance of runoff contaminating the water. When inspecting surface water, examine the area to determine if the farm is keeping the water safe from contamination. Surface water should be protected against animal intrusion. Animals are attracted to water and will go to great lengths to reach it. Walk the entire perimeter of the reservoir looking for signs of intrusion, such as broken fencing, feces, or prints. Birds are a potential element of surface water contamination. One common practice that farmers have used to protect reservoir water from contamination is to trim or remove trees overhanging surface water to minimize the possibility of roosting birds contaminating the water. Inspecting agricultural water doesn't stop at wells and reservoirs. Growing, harvesting, cooling, and packing are covered activities that are all either directly or indirectly affected by water. As your inspection continues, evaluate the water distribution at each step and ask questions about the water source. A soil amendment is a material that is intentionally added to the soil to improve its chemical or physical condition for growing plants, or to improve its capacity to hold water. A biological soil amendment is a soil amendment containing biological materials such as stabilized compost, manure, non-fecal animal byproducts, yard trimmings, etc. The Produce Safety Rule establishes criteria for the application of treated and untreated biological soil amendments of animal origin. During your inspection, determine the use of biological soil amendments of animal origin and evaluate their treatment and application.
It's fairly common for farmers to use biological soil amendments for nutrients in their field, and one of the more common ones would be manure. The concerns with the use of manure in the field, of course, are going to be pathogens. We want to make sure that soil amendment has been composted or otherwise treated to minimize the potential for pathogens to contaminate your crop. We also want to make sure you apply that biological soil amendment in a manner that's going to minimize the potential for the contamination of your crop. Now, you can use untreated or uncomposted biological soil amendments and then utilize a time interval before planting their crop.
Ask to see biological soil amendments of animal origin records and determine the dates of application in relation to the growing cycle to ensure that the produce safety rule requirements are being followed. During the growing season, the earliest human interaction with the crops is typically during transplanting and weeding. Some farms use herbicides to control weeds, while others use manual weeding crews. When weeding crews are in the fields, your focus as an inspector is on the employee practices and tools, with particular attention to health and hygiene. Farm workers should be dressed in clean clothing and appropriate footwear. Pesticides may also be used during the growing season. While pesticides and herbicides are regulated by the EPA, they are often diluted with water before application. If this solution comes in contact with a covered crop, then the water would fall under the produce safety rule.
Chemical use is fairly common on farms. We find chemicals used as pesticides as well as fertilizers. Under the produce safety rule, we do not regulate pesticides or fertilizers, but we do have concerns under the produce safety rule in terms of the safety of those pesticides and fertilizers, and it's centered around the water that is used to dilute them. We need to know that the water that is used to dilute any chemicals used on the crop is of appropriate sanitary quality for that crop.
Ask questions about the water source used to dilute chemicals and determine if the distribution system is being properly used and maintained. Harvesting and packing can introduce many possible sources of contamination to the crops, including machinery, tools, packing crates, and the employees themselves. Harvesting can be done manually or with a machine, also known as automated. If the farm you're inspecting is using machines to harvest, your inspectional focus should be on the design of the machines, the maintenance of the machines, and the employee practices.
All of our harvest machines are clean and sanitized daily. It's just very important to do that, specifically because we handle raw commodities. All of our equipment at the end of the day gets staged at a yard on the ranch, and we have a designated crew that is properly trained to clean and sanitize the equipment. So they'll go after the harvest is done and first clean all the product and then properly sanitize the equipment and get it ready for the next day.
During the inspection, observe the construction, design, or maintenance of any tools and equipment that may come into contact with food or food contact surfaces. How are they cleaned and sanitized before use? Where are they stored when they're not in use? Where and when are they cleaned? Determine if the design and installation of all equipment permits access to food contact surfaces for cleaning. Manual harvesting puts a stronger emphasis on proper employee practices. If the farm you're inspecting is harvesting manually, observe the employees to ensure that they are following proper personnel and food hygiene protocols to prevent contamination when handling produce and food contact surfaces. Look at the whole system to determine what might come into contact with the produce and if they're maintaining proper practices.
On farms, we'll find a variety of harvest equipment, from handheld knives to automated harvesters. But from the food safety point of view, the concern is the same. It's maintaining that food contact surfaces in a sanitary manner. And so when we go out and do a farm inspection, that's one of the things we're going to focus on during harvest is how do they maintain those food contact surfaces? What do they do with those handheld knives when they're on break? How do they keep that automated harvester clean and sanitary? And also when we look at the equipment that they're using during harvest, we may have to look outside the food contact surfaces. There may be framework that can have drip or drippage down onto our food contact surfaces, and we're going to have to catch that as well.
Another area of emphasis when inspecting employee harvest practices is the treatment of their handheld tools. Anything that comes in contact with the crop as it's harvested should be cleaned and sanitized as necessary and appropriate.
When it comes to handheld tools, what we don't want to see is employees sticking the tools in the ground in between uses or while they're on break. We want to see that the farm has a system in place where the employees are trained where to put their tools when they're not in use. What we don't want to see is people taking their knives on break with them to their meal, having their harvest tool with them right there while they're eating their meal, or laying it on the ground while they're eating their meal. We want to make sure that it's maintained in a clean and sanitary manner.
Once produce is harvested, it is packed for shipping. Farms can pack either in the field or may use a packing house. Different considerations apply when evaluating the field packing or packing house. During packing, the farm must take care that the produce is not contaminated. This means the workers must be appropriately trained and the equipment and tools must be appropriately cleaned and sanitized. Harvest and packing containers are another possible route of contamination. During your inspection, ask to see where the farm stores bins, crates, or any other materials that might come in contact with the harvested crop.
We saw different kinds of packing operations in the field. Clearly everything is packed in the field here. Tell me a little bit about how all that unfolds as far as containers and such.
Sure. So as you saw out there in the field, we deal with cardboard boxes, but also reusable containers. Whether it be cardboard boxes or reusable containers, the individuals that actually pick up the containers and take them to the harvest crew, they're trained to inspect those containers or carton, and if there's anything that looks abnormal, they'll put those containers or cartons to the side, and if it's a whole pallet, they have to put it to the side and call the supplier and tell them to pick it up, and either they're gonna dump it or they're gonna re-sanitize and clean them, because we don't want to use anything that looks suspicious that's gonna put the crop in jeopardy.
Packing containers must be clean and sanitary. Containers that are stored outside should be covered and protected from birds, dust, and rain.
Under the produce safety rule, any food contact surface, any surface that the crop comes in contact with, has to be maintained in a clean and sanitary manner. And this is going to include harvest containers, such as harvest baskets and such. It's very common to find harvest containers that are used multiple times in multiple seasons. They may even be stored outside in between uses. This is all going to be acceptable as long as they maintain those containers in a clean and sanitary manner for their crop.
Produce that is not packed in the field is often sent to a packing house. These buildings must follow food safety practices to ensure that produce is being packed, stored, and cooled in a manner that prevents contamination. If the produce is rinsed, washed, waxed, etc. at the packing house, inspect the water source to ensure that it is safe for use and that the equipment is regularly cleaned and sanitized. Cooling equipment is often used during the packing process. Determine if the method of cooling or cooling equipment may introduce potential for contamination. If water is used as a cooling medium, determine how the farm controls the water to prevent cross-contamination. Check that monitoring occurs constantly so that potential cross-contamination is minimized. If ice injectors are used, such as with broccoli, ask how the water and ice systems are kept sanitary and how often the injector nozzles are cleaned. If ice is manually packed into containers, determine how the ice is protected from contamination. In the packing house, check to make sure that necessary sanitation measures are in place, buildings are designed to be cleanable, and appropriate pest control is used. There are different reasons that an inspector may need to collect samples from the farm. While it is not anticipated that samples will need to be taken routinely during a produce inspection, you may need to collect samples when the agency has reason to believe a product might be contaminated. The Produce Safety Rule established requirements for the records that farms must keep. During the initial interview, you asked the farm representative to compile records for your review. These include training records, water records, cleaning and sanitizing records, biological soil amendments of animal origin records. Confirm that the farm is keeping adequate records that meet the minimum requirements of the Produce Safety Rule.
You know, walking around, looking at the operation, I saw a lot of, obviously, paperwork and records and such. And can you elaborate a little bit about what that means as far as your food safety program and why it's important?
Yes, well, paperwork is very crucial. Just an example, what you saw out there in the field, all the fertilizers that were being applied on the organic fields, all those fertilizers, it's healthy for the soil, healthy for the plant. However, those fertilizers, a lot of them are derived from animals. And one of the things we require from our supplier is every lot of fertilizer needs to get tested for certain pathogens. If it doesn't have that analysis, we're not buying anything. And if we don't have those analyses, that product never gets to our field. It's very crucial to have those documentations, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that every input that we apply to our crops is safe, because that would be put the crop in jeopardy.
What concerns and what kind of records did you keep with regarding water, irrigation water?
Yes, well, with water, like you said, we need it. Without water, you can't grow your crops. It's one of the very, very crucial of the farming operation. There's a few factors. First, we have to understand our water source. We do visual inspections of our water source. Aside from visual inspections, we test our water monthly. It's very crucial to know what kind of quality of water we have. So all those testings are done monthly and are kept, on file for record keeping.
The exit interview occurs at the end of your inspection. During this time, review your findings with a farm representative and discuss any actions that may be needed. Provide applicable resources and issue any forms required for the close of inspection.
At the end of the inspection of a produce farm, we're going to have an exit interview with the grower. And during this exit interview, it's going to be a review of the observations that occurred during your inspection. There should be no surprises to the farmer during this exit interview. It should simply be a review of everything that you've already seen and discussed with the grower during the inspection. Now, if there's any observations that are violations of the regulation that require you to write a report and issue to that farmer, this is the time to issue that report to that farmer.
Regulatory produce inspections help to build working relationships between produce farms and regulators. These relationships are crucial to educating the produce industry about the produce safety rule and the regulations that have been put in place to improve food safety.